This is Find Your Dream Job, the podcast that helps you get hired, have the career you want, and make a difference in life. I'm Mac Pritchard, your host and publisher of Mac's List. I'm joined by my co-hosts, Ben Forstag, Becky Thomas, and Jessica Black from the Mac's List team. This week, we're talking about Job Interview Preparation 101. Preparation can make all the difference in whatever you do. This is especially true in job interviews. Our guest expert this week is Revi Goldwasser. She runs a financial services staffing and recruitment firm. Revi says no matter what our field, there are basic steps we all must take before a job interview. She and I talk later in the show. Getting a job interview takes hard work, and you need to make the most of the opportunity it offers. Ben has found a blog post that shares 5 points every employer wants you to address in an interview. He tells us more in a moment. How do you break into a new field without formal education or other training in that area? That's our lesson or question of the week. It comes from Chris Rivers in Clovis, New Mexico. Becky shares her advice shortly. First, as always, let's check in with the Mac's List team, Becky and Jessica and Ben. And our topic this week is Job Interview Preparation 101. And I'd love to hear from you all. What are the things you always do to prepare for a job interview, or you just recommend to our listeners that they must do before they walk into that room?
Well, I stand in front of a mirror and I say, you're good enough, you're smart enough, and gosh darn it, you're going to get this job, Ben Forstad. No, I've only done that once.
Did it work?
No.
Okay, tip number 2.
So I think the most important thing you can do to prepare is really get to know the interviewer as much as you can. So like connect with them on LinkedIn, do a little internet searching about them. The more you can get inside the head of the interviewer in terms of like what their pain points are, why they're hiring, what they're looking for, even things like their background and their interests. You're looking for ways that you can position yourself as a solution and for touch points with them, right? And so, in the best of situations, you find like this is exactly what they're looking for, so you can position all of your skills around that. But even if it ends up like, oh, we both like playing tennis, like you can use that as a touch point to have a conversation with the hiring manager. And everyone knows that hiring managers make that decision not necessarily on who is the most qualified candidate, but with the person they feel the strongest connection to and the person they might want to work with. And so finding those touch points, whether it's tennis or something in your work history, I think can be a really valuable thing to do ahead of time.
Okay, so know the person you're going to interview, what they need, and what you have to offer, and recognize that everybody who gets into that room probably has established they have the skills they need to do the job.
Yeah, I mean, the employer probably assumes you have the skills, otherwise they wouldn't be spending the time talking to you. So yeah, you need to kind of know exactly how your skills are going to align into the organization's needs and that hiring manager's needs. But again, it's more than just those skills. It's also like is your personality going to align with their personality?
Okay. How about you, Jessica? What are your thoughts?
Yes. I was going to say something kind of similar in terms of doing some online research. I normally do it about the organization, though, kind of seeing what kind of, if there are news articles or things, what's kind of relevant in the organization, what's been happening. If they just had a merger, if they just had, their stock went up or they just got an award or something like that. You want to be able to be aware and be knowledgeable about that when you walk in the door so that you can either bring it up right away, or if it happens to come up in conversation, you can be right on there continuing that conversation and adding to that and not missing a beat and kind of being like, oh, I didn't know you won this prestigious award. You want to really be as knowledgeable as possible and show that you have done your research and you are prepared and you're following what they're doing. And I think also just, I don't know, I look through common interview questions. I have some typical ones that I always look through, but then I always do more online research of kind of like the 50 most common and the, some that are the most unusual as well, because I like to be prepared with, just in case there's an out of left field question, kind of preparing myself, sitting down with all of those questions and being sure that I have at least a general knowledge of how I'm gonna react to those, or not even just react, but be prepared to have a conversation around those questions.
I'm so glad you brought up the research, Jessica, because certainly as an employer, but I hear it from other employers too, it's surprising how many people walk into interviews and when they have a chance to ask questions, say, well, tell me about the company. Mm-hmm. And there's a good piece of advice I've heard over the years, which is don't ask any questions about something you could find on the company website.
Absolutely. Yeah. Don't waste anybody's time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good tips. Becky, what are your top tips for job interview preparation?
One thing I would add, I think that you guys are right on as far as like understanding the company and the interviewer and really catering your messaging to those folks. When I'm preparing for an interview, the most nervous I get is about like talking about myself.
Mm-hmm. And Me too. That's why I like to study all the interview questions so I can be prepared.
So you like rehearse what you're going to answer. Another thing that I do is like write down some good examples from my past experience that I think might be relevant in that job interview, and just prepare and practice those too. Because I really struggle being like, I did a great job doing this, Like, so I need to practice how I'm going to say that without being nervous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that you brought up a good point, and that's sort of what I was meaning as well of how I take those moments and practice. Mm-hmm. Essentially what I'm going to say is kind of like crafting that message or the story I'm going to tell around how my background and my experience has led me to this position in particular, and how to just make sure that I'm ready. Because again, when you're kind of your adrenaline is pumping, you're nervous and all of that.
Really
nervous.
It's a nerve-wracking experience.
Exactly, and so you want to not just leave it up to chance, and believe that you're going to just remember it in the moment, because there's so much pressure and there's so much happening that being prepared is just really essential.
Yeah. Jessica, Becky, Mac, you're good enough, you're smart enough, and gosh darn it, you're going to get this job.
Wait, thanks, you said that didn't work.
I like it.
It was good.
like it too.
Yeah, thank you. We are enough.
We are.
Yeah. I love all these tips, and I think it also helps to keep in mind a job interview is a business meeting, and it's a serious one, important one. And nobody would walk into an important business meeting without preparation, right? And so I think getting the basics right before you walk into the room is just essential. And I know Revi's going to have great tips besides the ones that we've shared today. So I'm looking forward to that. But before we talk to Revi, Ben, we're turning to you because you're out there every week poking around the internet looking for books, resources, websites, other tools our listeners can use in a job search or in their career. So what have you uncovered for us this week?
So this week, my resource is on topic. We're talking about interviews, and the article I have this week to share with you is 5 things every employer wants to hear in an interview. And this comes from workitdaily.com. Work It Daily is the website of JT O'Donnell, who was our guest back in episode 70-something, I think. Somewhere in there.
Wow.
She's a great resource.
Yeah, she's great.
So, the reason I like this is when I talk to people about that interview process, I always tell them, there's some things the interviewers need to hear in that conversation. And in addition to kind of sharing your specific skills and experience and education and culture fit, you need to make sure you're touching on these things that the employer needs to hear to put their mind at ease about you being the right candidate. And JT really just simply breaks this down here. And so there's 5 of them, and I'm going to read through them real quick. Number 1, you will never have to tell me what to do twice. Number 2, I will complete the job or assignment you give me with excellence. Number 3, I am an agreeable person. Number 4, I am easy to correct and instruct. I am teachable. And number 5, I am a loyal employee. So these 5 things, none of these are like huge, insurmountable things that you need to prove. They're pretty simple stuff, and like this is kind of the baseline of what people look for in employees. But I was wondering, Mac, as an employer, is there another thing that should be added to this list from your perspective? Is there something you want to hear people say, and when they say it, it just like everything starts clicking into place?
I think every employer wonders, what are you going to do for me? And because it's a business relationship, and it's just as somebody who's applying for a job wants to know what are they going to get out of the experience, how is it going to help them professionally, what kind of salary and benefits are they going to receive. An employer wants to know what you can do for them. And I find that the candidates who explain that well have an advantage over those who don't.
So I think that's true. So I guess we can say there's 6 things now.
Well,
we're adding one to JT's list.
Yeah.
These items that you need to address, again, the issue is not a big issue, and they're relatively simple things to prove. The rub here is that you can't just come out and say, you will never have to tell me to do something twice.
That's what I was going to say, is that these are not things that you just say out loud, but you demonstrate.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. You can't walk in and say, I am an agreeable person.
No, you have to demonstrate
you can. It just doesn't work.
It'll be awkward.
Yeah. So you have to show rather than tell.
Exactly. And so we've talked in the past about the importance of like kind of creating narratives in your interview answers. Mm-hmm. And these are the things you think out ahead of time, right? And you don't know exactly when you're going to use each narrative, or because you're responding to prompts clearly. But like think through some of the ideas. Like think through how you could show that you're an agreeable person in one of your answers about something else. You know you're going to get a question about tell me about yourself, some version of that. How can you integrate some of these ideas into your response to that question? Or if the employer asks you, tell me about the greatest accomplishment you've made in your career. Again, think of ways that you could like integrate the idea into like, I'm easy to correct and instruct into that response. I think the truth of the matter is sometimes the prompts that people give you, or the employer, when they hear these things, they're not even like actively hearing them. They're not even conscious that you're saying these things, and they're not like checking off like a list in their mind. But it kind of like feeds into our lizard brain or something. Mm-hmm. And so you can kind of game the employer and get inside their mind, and you're putting their mind at ease without them even knowing it. So I thought this was a good article. Again, it dives into each one of these topics. It comes from workitdaily.com. It's called 5 Things Every Employer Wants to Hear in an Interview. And as always, the link will be in the show notes.
Okay, well, thank you, Ben. If you have a suggestion for Ben, he'd love to hear from you. Please write him, and we would be thrilled to share your idea on the show. His address is ben@maxlist.org. Now let's turn to you, our listeners, and Becky joins us to answer one of your questions. So, Becky, what's in the MaxList mailbag this week?
This week, we got a question in via email from Christopher Veers in Clovis, New Mexico. It's a bit of a longer question, but I think it is definitely relatable. A lot of folks are sort of dealing with a similar issue, so I'm going to go ahead and read through his question. So Chris says, I've been working since I was 16, and the common career field has always been labor, from construction to landscaping and now property maintenance. I've had a few management positions in retail. I worked for law enforcement, I served a stint in the Army, and recently I picked up some freelance writing. I'm very intrigued by marketing, but I've never been in sales per se, but have had experience with upselling and product display to increase sales. My current position is maintenance for over 100 apartments and houses, and from time to time I assist my manager with advertising campaigns to fill vacant units and coming up with community activities for them as well. My question with my background is, how would I transition from working in the field to marketing? I do not hold a degree other than my high school. I do hold a couple of certificates of completions in unrelated fields. And I do not hold consecutive experience. Any advice would be greatly appreciated. Thank you in advance. So thank you, Chris, for that question. I think you've given us a lot of good context with your question. And so I sort of came up with some ideas for you as far as sort of steps that you might take to advance toward a career in marketing. And, take it for what you will. But I think that if you sort of try these things out, you'll hopefully sort of get more direction in how you can actually follow through and apply for a job in marketing. So the first thing to think about is you've obviously got a variety of experiences, but you don't necessarily know how to translate those into the new field. But you do have a lot of relevant experience for a marketing career. It's just mostly secondary to the roles that you've had in the past. And it's clear that you've already done some thinking about this, which is great. So I recommend first adding some structure to your approach. And the biggest thing here when you're trying to change career fields is to look at your transferable skills. So not necessarily the task that you've completed, but the skills that you needed to complete the task. And write down all the tasks that you've completed that are like related to marketing per se. So like, for example, you mentioned you can sell products. You've done upselling and like product display. So you can sell products in creative ways. Upselling is all about like knowing your audience and connecting with their needs and then showing them how they need the product that you're sharing. And that's really essential to marketing, and you've already done that. So that's just one example of how you can show your transferable skills moving into that new field. And then go through the rest of your experience that you've had. So you've held management positions, and that's leadership. You've served in the Army and in law enforcement, and that shows your ability to execute instructions, to contribute to a team, and just go through all of your experience this way, and you'll find you have a lot of fodder to pivot into a new field, and it's clear that you've got some good experience for marketing specifically. And then next, I'd advise you to do a couple things. First, take your big list of transferable skills and do some research into the marketing industry. There's several avenues that you can take within marketing, and I would encourage you to be a little more specific than just sort of looking for a general marketing job, although there are like marketing coordinator sort of entry-level jobs. It's going to be easier to sell yourself as a practitioner of a specific area. So, for example, like paid search advertising is something that you could focus your advertising and sales experience to sort of focus in on a specific niche like that. And so that's just one example, but sort of like check out the industry, like get familiar with the different avenues that you could take. And then when you do find a niche, it's much easier to gain more knowledge in that area. So you don't have to like learn everything about marketing all at once. Let's see. Oh, and then the internet is really your friend. So especially in marketing, there are tons of resources that are free. They're online. You just have to sort of do the work to get there. With the paid search example, you can study and get your Google AdWords certificate for free, which is a long process, but like employers respect when you have that. By choosing a path, you'll be able to really build your knowledge and experience that will help you land jobs in a specific area, and you won't be overwhelmed in your search as well. And then finally, I wrote down all these ideas, so hopefully this helps.
This is a great list.
This is really
These
good.
are
I'm like,
very,
whew, yeah.
very good tips.
Okay, last thing. Once you've got a specific goal, so you know sort of where you want to go, you've got a job title or two or three that you want to search for, and maybe you've also found some companies in your area that you want to target, and you've done your studying, you've gained some knowledge, you sort of know some of the buzzwords, and you can now start to update your resume and LinkedIn with those transferable skills and sort of the goals that you've established for yourself, and then just get connected within that area. Use LinkedIn, join some LinkedIn groups, just continue to learn, and then you'll start to meet people through those, just see who's active, and get in touch with sort of in-person networking as well. So start to meet folks within your industry. And the last thing is just like, don't be afraid to use your past experience, like still list those jobs that you've had in the past, even though they're not like marketing titles. Just highlight the tasks and responsibilities that really relate to that job that you've decided that you want.
Yeah.
So hopefully that will help you get some direction.
Good.
Do you guys have any other thoughts?
I have a couple other things. That was really amazing.
This question resonated with me. I think a lot of people go through this and they're just like, I don't know, like I want to do this, but I don't know how.
Right. And it feels so disparate in what you're going from and moving to, but it's really not. And I think that I say this all the time. I'm really big on using those transferable skills and bringing all of those skills out that you already possess and then translating them into how it's relevant to what you're moving into. So I think that you focusing on that was amazing. I would also say, Chris, to keep doing the things you mentioned before that you help your manager with some of the advertising things. I would say keep looking for opportunities like that, and maybe even having a conversation with your manager and saying, hey, this is something that I'm really interested in, and I'd love to take on, more marketing. And again, what you said before, Becky, be specific about what exactly you want to do in the marketing field. Yeah. But once you've identified that, say, I really want to, do all of the advertising for the vacant units or whatever it is you want to do, and talk to your manager about that and say, is this something that I can add to my roles and responsibilities? And maybe that's something that your manager wants to offload anyway and doesn't want to do. And so that might be a win-win situation, but also it will let them know that you are interested in moving that direction and that you're also want to take on new responsibilities, which shows leadership. Yeah. Additionally, I would continue looking for other, if there's volunteer opportunities in any organization, just keep looking for ways that you can get involved with organizations that need a specific marketing skill you're looking to showcase, hone, strengthen whatever it is that you're looking to do. If there's some kind of organization that you can volunteer with, that you can go in and say, hi, I see that you have a need for building your audience in marketing or whatever, and going to them and saying, here's how I can help you, and doing it as a volunteer. And then that will also help you build that your resume, and add that to the LinkedIn. It'll also show that you are volunteering, which is always a plus. So those are my couple additions.
Great tips. Ben?
This is turning into a marathon
I
session
know.
here. So I'll be very brief with my comments. Two things. I believe Chris said he was also kind of interested in sales.
He said he's done sales work before, so it sounds like that might be like the sort of narrow end of the wedge.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think sales, from my experience, it's an easy field to jump into. I mean, it's a very competitive field, and so you need to get results relatively quickly. But I think there's this sense that great salespeople are born, right? And so that you don't necessarily need to have a lot of formal training to get your foot in the door. If you can show results relatively quickly in sales, you can get in. The bigger point though I'd want to make though is Chris said he had served in the military. Use that network, Chris. If you're looking to get your foot in the door, again, employers hire people that they know and trust, and you've built up this amazing network through the military. Even people you don't know, your time in the military has connected you to people in that way. And so they may well say, I'm going to take a chance on, my brother in arms over here and give you an opportunity to see what you can do. So work on that, those connections, and make sure you put that front and center when you're talking to people.
All great advice. The only thing I would add is kudos to Chris for not having a college degree stop him from aiming high. And thinking about leadership positions in sales or marketing. Sometimes people consider these opportunities and think, it'll never happen because I didn't get a degree or I didn't go to college. And what I love about Chris's question is he's saying, this is what I want to do. Hey, give me your advice about ways I might make that happen. Yeah. And obviously there's a lot of work involved, but he's
taking the initiative.
He's taking the initiative.
For sure.
In my experience, or what I've seen, is that the absence of a college degree is mostly a barrier for your first job. Early on in your career. Once you've got your foot in the door in your professional career, you can kind of keep moving up. And even if it's a formal requirement that you need a job in a position, often they can waive that or just ignore that requirement.
Yeah. And if you can demonstrate the skills that you've used, and your ability to do it, that means so much more.
Absolutely.
Cool. Thanks, guys. Yeah, good luck, Chris. And I think it's going to be great.
Great. Well, thank you, Becky. And if you have a question for Becky, please send her an email. Her address is becky@maxlist.org. And you can also call our listener line. That number is area code 716-JOB-TALK. Or send us a message on the MaxList Facebook page. If we use your question on the show, we'll send you a copy of Land Your Dream Job Anywhere. And we'll be back in a moment. When we return, I'll talk to this week's guest expert, Revi Goldwasser, about Job Interview Preparation 101. Now let's turn to this week's guest expert, Revi Goldwasser. Revi Goldwasser is the founder and senior managing partner of Wall Street Personnel, a financial services staffing and recruitment firm. She also owns and operates jobsonwallstreet.com, an online job board, and she hosts a podcast, Find a Job Like a Pro. Revi joins us today from Boca Raton, Florida. Revi, thanks for being on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Now, Revi, our topic today is Job Search Preparation 101. And I know when it comes to job interviews, you're a firm believer in not winging it, aren't you?
Absolutely. If you're going to wing it, you might as well not even bother showing up.
Yeah. So tell me more about that, Revi. Why do people need to prepare for a job interview? Why shouldn't they just wing it?
Well, at the end of the day, if you think about how much work goes to just getting that interview, finally getting that interview is not just about showing up. You've done so much preparation, so much research with your resume, with looking for a job, with the stress of saying, where am I going to end up, and preparing and researching, all those things that come to that point. If you're just going to kind of show up, and just wing it, you've wasted everyone's time, but really you've wasted your own time. So that's a real shame.
So I can imagine some listeners saying, well, I'm not sure I want the job. I got this call out of the blue. Does that mean I still have to prepare?
So basically there's a lot of different components that go into it. And it's funny that you should bring that up with a phone call, because that's even one of the, I have so many tips that I encourage job seekers to really understand and know and prepare. And let's go right into the phone call. There is nothing worse than getting a phone call from an employer or somebody in HR, recruiter, and let's say you're, running out to the bathroom, or let's say you're out grabbing a sandwich or getting a cup of coffee at Starbucks, and you answer the phone, and it's, hey, I'm Jane Doe calling from ABC Company. We got your resume. Do you have time to talk right now? Your answer has to be no, but 99% of the time, the person's so excited and they're going to be like, you know what? I'm at Starbucks having coffee. I'm going to wing it. And that's an absolute disaster. And that's right there, one of the so many points that discusses the preparation, that if you do get that phone call for the quick screen, the answer should be, you know what? Thank you so much for reaching out. I'm excited to speak with you, but I'm stepping into a meeting, or I'm just about to sit down to have lunch. May I call you later this afternoon or tomorrow at a time that's better suited? Guess what that gives you? Time to prepare. You sound polished and professional, and then you even know who you're talking about, because half the time you don't even know who the heck is calling you.
So let's play that out, Revi. Whether you're asking for time to prepare for a call the following day, or you've sent in an application after doing all that research that you described, and you have finally an appointment for an interview, what are the basic steps you need to do, whether that conversation is going to happen in 36 hours for a phone screener or actually a formal sit-down interview?
Perfect. So usually, firms, especially in today's common era, they tend to do phone interviews first just to save time. So let's kind of focus on that first, and then we'll break it down to an in-person interview, because there are certain components that differ in those two scenarios. First and foremost, again, as mentioned, if you get that phone call off the cuff, do not ever take a phone screen at that moment. And on the same token, make sure when you're looking for a job to clean up the voicemail. The last thing I want is, yo, babe, you reached my voicemail, something funny and cool like that. No, that's what I tell my kids now they're in college. I'm like, by now you're interviewing, make sure, as they're looking for summer internships, to make sure you have a professional voicemail. So that's really important for almost pre-preparation. So we're assuming now that you've secured a time to speak with that manager or HR professional. What is it that you do? Well, first of all, make sure you review the job description before you get on that phone call. You have probably applied to several positions, and many of them may be a blur. When you get a hold of that, when that person does speak to you on the phone, say, please, can you repeat your full name, your position and title at the firm, and for what position? And you can, again, just for memory's sake. So now you know exactly the role, and hopefully part of your housekeeping beforehand. As you've applied for positions, you have BCC'd yourself, you have kept certain notes where you know which job you're applying to. So then when you get that phone interview, you know the position. Now, the night before, not 5 minutes before, but the night before, print out that job description and review it. Make a bullet sheet. I always recommend people to take a piece of paper, much like I've done with you now, Mac. As we're speaking, there's certain points I want to make sure I get across when I'm focused, not when I'm on the phone call and I'm going to forget. So write bullet points. Oh, they're asking for PowerPoint, XYZ. I have PowerPoint XYZ. Let me write it down and let me give them an example of how I know it. So this way on the phone call, the next day on the interview, you right away tell them how you have a direct skill set that, that they're asking for that you specifically have. So that's a very important component of preparing for that phone screen. This is not just about saying, hi, how are you? This is about really making sure that they know you're qualified for the position. But the most important part of the phone screen most of the time is your communication skills. Many times when a phone screen occurs before the in-person, there's a reason for it. They want to hear how you present yourself, how you articulate, how you speak on the phone. So make sure you're not drinking a cup of coffee, you're not eating an apple or chewing gum. You want to be careful too. You want to be careful of that. And same concept. No TV on, alarms off. If you happen to be at home, close the windows. If you're like in a big city like New York, there's always the sirens. Those are all good housekeeping tips to be prepared. Same concept then goes to an in-person. Let's say they want you to come in for an in-person. All those things that we just talked about become as relevant. Key points, looking at that job description, reviewing your resume and saying, okay, I have X, I have Y, I have Z, I have all those things. Not just assuming they're going to read it. I love it when a candidate says, well, it's on my resume. Irrelevant. I'm reading 1,000 resumes. It's your job to tell me why you're qualified. I've now granted you the interview to come in. You need to tell me why you're qualified because I'm busy, I'm stressed, I'm squeezing you between 2 and 3, and I've got to go, and I have my boss that I have to report to. So make those 30 minutes, that 1 hour count by really executing, but you do that by being prepared. So you know what the job seeks, you know what you have, you bring those two things together, and you execute with that presentation of clearly communicating how you are qualified for the job, because that's what it all comes down to. How does your experience fit into my need today? Not what you want to do in 10 years, not what I needed yesterday, but how do you help me get my job done?
So let's talk about the phone screen for a moment, Revi. You do that preparation. You've studied the job posting. You've gone back and reviewed your application materials. You got your list of bullets. You know what you want to, the points you want to make. How do you close that conversation? When you've made all your points, how do you bring that meeting to an end, and how do you get clear about next steps?
That's a great question. First and foremost, I'm going to tell every single person listening, you cannot be in control. The person on the phone is in control. So you're not the one that decides how to close it. They decide how to close it. So you have to beat off their energy. I just had a phone interview yesterday. The candidate almost became the hiring manager. He was grilling my client with questions to a point that her feedback to me was, I felt like I was applying for the job, not that he was applying for the job with me. And that's it. Interview was over. He was never even granted an in-person. So you have to go off the tempo of the employer and listen to their cues and their feedback. Sometimes a phone interview can only be 10 minutes. You might be so prepared with 3 pages of notes, but they're just wanting to talk to you for 10 minutes. So you have to, what I call, zip the lip and let them be in charge, and they will tell you what the next steps are. And all you can do at the end is say, thank you for your time. I'm extremely interested, and I do look forward in continuing the process. And I look forward to hearing from you, again real soon. And that's it.
What about preparation for an in-person interview? You described what you should do for the phone screener. What additional work in preparation do you recommend, Revi?
Oh gosh, we could literally be here for a whole week. I mean, you're giving me 15 minutes. It's not enough time.
I know, we've only got 15 or 20 minutes.
It's endless.
Yeah, we got to go straight to the headlines.
I know. Make sure you know with whom you're meeting. Don't be afraid to ask the hiring manager or HR to perhaps send you an interview itinerary. That's tremendous preparation, because by doing that, you can then go to the company's website and look up their bios, or you can go into LinkedIn. It's so powerful with LinkedIn because you might find out that you have common interests, a common alma mater. Perhaps you worked at the same firm years ago. What a beautiful segue when you're meeting with that person in during the interview, and mention, when I looked up your profile on the bio on LinkedIn, I noticed that we both did X, or we both have this in common. It almost creates a slightly personal experience during the interview, which is always nice. So that's certainly something to prepare for. Don't be afraid to ask for that itinerary to help you. And most of the time, they're very comfortable in presenting that to you. The other component, of course, is, and this is so obvious, yet sometimes it just isn't, get there early. If they're telling you it's 11 o'clock, in your head, 10:30. If they tell you it's 2 o'clock, in your head, it's 1:30. You can have traffic, you can have an accident, you can get lost. All those things are so important. Give yourself a little leeway. I would rather you show up early than be stressed out and come 5 minutes late, because you guys get one time to impress. I'm meeting 50 people. You get only one chance. If you're going to be late on the first interview, come on, it just shows you're not a planner. So that's the other really key thing, is to be prepared. And the most important thing as well in preparation, and I know this again may sound silly, but turn off your cell phone, turn it off. A lot of the younger generation, that's part of, it's like their arms and legs. And, a lot of people are more senior in those roles that they're interviewing. There's nothing more rude when you're in an interview and the phone rings or buzzes or beeps. I'm not talking even silent. I'm talking turn the phone off. I'd sometimes even recommend for job seekers to just leave the phone in the car, so that you're not even going to be tempted. Just the other day as well, I had a manager come up to me and said, Revi, in between the interviews, we noticed that, Jane Doe popped her phone and was checking messages. We were not impressed. It sounds ridiculous, but they just wanted this person to only focus on the new company, and that's it. So they're watching you in all different angles, don't forget.
Yeah. Now, we talked about phone screeners and first interviews. What additional preparation do you recommend when you're asked back for a second, third, or maybe even a fourth interview?
It's absolutely phenomenal if you get called back in between the first and second, no exceptions, especially while you're waiting. The one thing you have to absolutely, no exceptions, do is send a thank you note to each and every person you've met with. And during that interview, make sure you grab their business cards, which will help. And if you don't, most of the time you can kind of figure it out, because people who work at a firm, the minute you have the HR emails address, you already know what the other people's emails addresses are. I don't have an issue with it. Same email address. Thank you for your time and consideration and meeting with me. I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. I'm excited. I feel that I'm qualified because of X, Y, and Z, and I look forward to continuing the process. You can send that to 5 different people. They're not sharing the email, but make sure you don't do a group email. And make sure it gets done within 24 hours. And for goodness sakes, don't send it from work. Make sure you do it from the house. So that's something to do in between to segue. As far as preparation for the second and third, it's going to get meatier. So the minute you're being asked back, there's a couple of things going on. Number one, they feel you are qualified and well suited for the role. So you will be meeting with more seasoned people, more higher level professionals. The interviews will get tougher. It'll come based on intellect, product knowledge, technology knowledge. You better make sure you're ready for it. If it's a writer position, you might have a case study. If it's an accounting position, they may give you an accounting, a balance sheet or an income statement problem. I have roles for traders and portfolio managers. They give them stock market situations. What's the interest, what's the yield, what's the IRR, all those things that are asked in the business. So be prepared to be tested in product knowledge and intellect as it relates to the position, because it will get meatier. And just keep moving forward. And you don't have the job until you have the job offer. Don't ever forget that.
Can you over-prepare, Revi? Is that possible?
Never. I like over-preparation because it can hurt you. It's the under-preparation. You don't ever want to walk out and say, darn, I should have said this, I should have said that. It's like walking in and going out to a party. Well, should I dress a really great outfit, or should I just go in my workout clothes? Always want to be overly dressed, overly prepared, so that you execute and nail it. Always.
Okay. Well, great advice. I really appreciate you joining us this week. Now, tell us, Revi, what's coming up next for you?
Well, I'm basically, I've spent 18 years recruiting in the business, obviously with an emphasis within financial services. But what my passion is right now, of course, I continue my recruitment business. I really want to parlay my insider knowledge, my insider secrets, so to speak, that I know how employers really think. A lot of people out there look for jobs. They're not understanding that one or two or three little small things that they can do can really shift how they secure an interview and get multiple job offers. I'm basically sharing that knowledge with everyone. I put together an incredible e-course that usually I sell for $497, but for your audience, this is unlimited amounts of downloads or unlimited amounts of access. We're selling it for only $47. The coupon code is Find Your Dream Job. It is a 60 video, 70 worksheet course that really dissects every component of the job search: resume, interviewing, where to find jobs, how to answer 25 questions, how to negotiate salaries, how to resign, how to handle sticky background issues. It is endless, and I'm excited that I put it together. It's like my third child. Even though I have two sons, I call that e-course my third child, and would love for you guys to check it out. I'm sure it'll help you, and just hoping to help each and every one of you find your dream job.
Well, that's a very generous offer, Revi. We'll be sure to include a link to your course and other content in the show notes. And I know that people can also find you online at your website, and that's https://ReviGoldJobExpert.com. Revi, thanks for being on the show this week.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Take care.
Lovely. Bye, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.
We're back in the Max List studio with Jessica, Becky, and Ben. What were your impressions of my conversation with Revi? Ben, you're leaning into the microphone.
So I think this is a really important conversation, and Revi talked about this, and I've seen it too with job seekers, which is there's this tendency to think like, if I can just get the interview, then it's all downhill from there, right?
Yeah.
And I've done that myself, where like I get the call that I'm going to have an interview next week, and then like in my head, I've already gotten the job, and I'm thinking about how to decorate the new office. And but there's a lot more to do to get the job at that point, right?
Yeah.
And so preparing for the interview is so important. The one thing I would say at the very end, you asked, like, could you over-prepare? And I could think of a couple scenarios in which you could over-prepare, or at least, like, try to do too much in an interview. Like, I know I've done this before where, like, it was for a nonprofit organization, and I found out all their board members and, like, got, like, information about their board members and started, like, asking the HR manager, like, so how does Joe Schmo interact with the organization? And like, it was like I was just trying to do too much or try to show off that I had done too much research. And I think it did exactly what she said about, like, not, like, reading the room or reading the interviewer about when they wanted to wrap up the conversation. So I guess...
Or that kind of comes through as if you're trying to force it and it's not there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that wasn't over-preparing. It was just trying to demonstrate the preparation.
Yeah, I think many people, and I've certainly made this mistake earlier in my career, treat the job interview as a part of the discovery process. And they walk into the room thinking, well, this seems like an interesting opportunity. I'd like to learn more. And that's not why you're there. You need to do that research before you apply. And if you're still uncertain about whether you want the position after you are offered an interview, you really need to do it before you walk into the door. And even if you're still not 100% certain, you've got to be prepared to ask or show why you're a good candidate. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the other thing that I really liked that she said was just to keep in mind the interviewer's like schedule and their needs, and to do everything you can to make it easy for them. And that really comes down to the preparation that you've done and like connecting your experience and skills with what you've inferred their needs are, so that they can come into the interview like you're ready to go. You're like answering their questions on schedule. They're busy. They are like impressed by you. They walk out the door and like they keep you in mind because like they're like, oh, this person could help me like make this pain point easier for me, and just make that impression. But that does take a lot of work on the front end for you as the job seeker. So it's good to keep that in mind.
It is. And I don't know. I mean, I liked her. She even said this in her interview with you, Mac, about that it's common sense, but it needs to be reiterated of leave extra time for traffic, don't be late, and things like that. And leaving your phone, I do that. I don't even bring my phone in. I leave it in the car or leave it wherever. Because even though my phone is always on silent or do not disturb, I still have like these these moments of panic of that like something's going to happen. And so I would rather just not be stressed about it. And I think that it's easier, and you don't need it. You can sit in a waiting room for 5 minutes without your phone, and it'll be there when you come back.
Yeah. Good advice. Well, great conversation, and thank you all. And thank you, our listeners, for downloading today's episode of Find Your Dream Job. If you like what you hear, please sign up for our free weekly newsletter. In every issue, we give you the key points of that week's show, and we also include links to all the resources mentioned. And you'll also get a transcript of the full episode. If you subscribe to the newsletter now, we'll send you our new guide, The Top Career Podcasts of 2017. Discover all the shows that can help you find a great job and get the career you want. Get your free newsletter and podcast guide today. Go to maxlist.org/topcareerpodcasts2017. And join us next Wednesday when our special guest will be Maggie Mistel. She'll explain why you need a career manifesto. Until next time, thanks for letting us help you find your dream job.